We have three speakers. They're all actually based in the States. In no particular order, we have Neal, who's Executive Director at Cummins of Highway Business, who looks as if he might be on recording on the moon, but is actually not there at the moment. We have Darren Tasker. If you want to say hello, Darren.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody.
Okay. As you may have guessed, Darren is based in the States, but he's actually English as well. Darren is Vice President of Industrial Sales, Volvo Penta of the Americas. And then finally, we have Bill Chimley, who is Director of Training and Publications with Komatsu American Corporation. So, gentlemen, I hope you all got that correct. The titles are ready. Just a few housekeeping notes before we start for people who are registering. We anticipate that I will be talking to the panel members for about 30 to 35 minutes. And then we will have time for a fairly quick fire 10-minute Q&A session. So for the attendees, you do have the option of sending questions to me. So if you, on your Zoom page, you will see there's a Q&A panel, probably near the box at the bottom of your screen. If you've got any questions, just go to that, write the questions, send them to me. Hopefully, I'll be able to. We'll have time to ask some of the questions. We have had a lot already, so if your question isn't put to one of the panel members, it's simply because we've had such a glut of questions that have come through to us. But feel free to send them in anyway. So let's kick it off then. So the webinar is about what impact COVID-19 has had and is still having on all the industries. But we want to use the webinar as well to sort of look ahead. I mean, we all realize that the devastation that's been caused by the virus, but we want to use this as an opportunity to look ahead, to see what people think about future markets, when they might be, things might get back to anywhere near normal, and by what time. And we're also going to learn, hopefully, about what best practice each of our panelists have noticed during this period, and try and learn a little bit from them about how they think their sort of working practices might change a little bit going forward as well. So the webinar should be great. It's a great panel, and I would like to thank our sponsors for this event, who are Antares Life Cycle Solutions, Carlisle Brake and Friction, Cummins, JCB Power Systems, and OS Cooling Solutions. So, gentlemen, let's kick it off. I'll start with you, Eric, if that's okay. First question. Can you give an idea of to what extent COVID-19, what has been the impact on you on COVID-19, and how badly has it affected your business?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for calling in and appreciate the opportunity to be part of this, and thanks to you and Diesel Progress for that invitation. I think when we think about it as a company, we kind of categorize it into kind of the personal element and then also the business element. The personal side of things is our #1 priority within Cummins, and I'm happy to say that most or the impact to our employees and and their families have been very minimal across the world. We have had a few cases in a couple of different areas, but it's thankfully been managed very. In terms of how we are doing business today, most of us around the world are where we don't have essential work in terms of maybe physically serving customers or building engines. We are continuing working from our homes. That had went into impact or into effect in the March timeframe. The area that we've probably seen the biggest impact really goes into our supply chain, and we've been working really hard with a global supply chain to try to keep the disruptions from a manufacturing perspective minimized as best we can. I will tell you that a couple of months ago, there were several of our sites that were either running on fumes or very minimal volumes, but it was mostly driven from either local regulations where labor was suspended in different parts of the world, such as India and a couple of others, or really the lack of a supply chain issue we've got there. So the supply chain's probably been the biggest struggle for us. As I speak today, almost all of our plants are up, back and running. We do have to sometimes shift our production around by shop order based on the components that we're receiving. Some of our plants are working, extra shifts to create social distancing within those operations. And of course, in the distribution channel, we're also trying to make measures to, minimize the health risk and safety that are on there. So that's just a couple of comments. I don't want to absorb too much time.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Thanks. Darren, over to you. Do you want to outline what impact the virus has and is perhaps having on Volvo Penta and the way it does business?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And again, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this webinar today. Thank you to Diesel Progress. I'll just take one step back. We decided to push into the off-highway segments probably around 10 years ago when we made some significant investments in Tier 4. And our business has been steadily growing since then. And we now have a very diverse customer base. We have customers that have got engines being operated in critical applications. So we've got standby generators backing up medical facilities. We have mobile generators and pumps that are there for storm relief. We have firefighting trucks, materials handling, moving product around ports and distribution centers. So, we primarily wanted to keep our customers operating. And this, I really have to give a big thank you to our dealer network. We were in strong communication with our dealer network when this crisis hit. We made certain provisions when it comes to parts availability, when it came to service tool availability. And, our dealer network, we have no exceptions really. Every single dealer we have stepped up. And a big thank you to our dealer network for keeping our customers and operating going through these extremely difficult times. I will echo the safety of employees. That was a primary focus to us. We had some events coming up at the time that ConExpo hit the ground, and I think we'll come on to talk a little bit more about that, but we took our safety of employees extremely seriously. And not just our employees, but our partners and society at large. We have had some production disturbances. We are a global manufacturer. We have factories all over the world. I think one of the benefits of global manufacturing is that the timing of the crisis has been different in different parts of the world. So we've had some facilities shutting down at different times, which has been a benefit to us. We've been able to move some of our production around for the different facilities that are operating. But it does mean that we've had some impact on customers. We've had some supply challenges to our customers that were very difficult to avoid, and these were taken at the very highest level at in the Volvo Group. We've been involved in crisis meetings since almost day one to try and maintain the supply to our customers, to try and ensure that the most critical situations are dealt with. And I've been personally involved in meetings, with all of the senior management of the company, trying to safeguard our customers and our operators. We certainly invoked teleworking from almost day one, which has proved to be successful certainly for the office side of things. And we'll come on to talk more about some of the teleworking and webinar activities that we've undertaken. But I think that primarily are the actions that we've taken.
Okay, thank you for that, Darren. Bill, do you have a few thoughts?
Yes, I do, and thank you as well, Ian, and Diesel Progress for the invitation to speak today. I definitely agree with Darren and Eric that safety is a first priority, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on in some of the subsequent questions. Komatsu has always had a business philosophy of what we call going to the gemba. Gemba is a Japanese word that means where the actual work occurs. As Darren mentioned, a lot of our products and solutions are off highway, so they're not easily accessible. So one of the immediate impacts on our company was travel. And again, if your machines do not work where they're easily accessible by plane, train, automobile around the world, that could be very difficult. And so I think one of the first impacts we saw was how we could pivot digitally to connect to those workplaces, whether it's a business partner's workplace, customer's job site. And we've been able to spin that up very quickly to be able to continue to hear the voice of the customer or business partner. An example I would have is part of my training responsibility is our ultra class electric drive dump trucks. And one of my trainers based here in Atlanta, Georgia, conducted a class almost in the Arctic Circle in Sweden for a group of product support people. And they connected to our proving grounds out in Arizona to another truck out there to do some onboard diagnostics. The time zones, as you can imagine, Ian, were all over the board for that training, but it does feel like the world is maybe a smaller place as we digitally connect. And so I think there is a little bit of a silver lining, and to the extent it's how it has changed our company and how we go to the Gemba.
Yeah, I suppose just as important now, and much very pertinent is when do you think that market conditions are going to get back to anywhere near normal? I know it's virtually impossible to predict, but start again with you, Eric. Do you have any thoughts on timetables for normal times again?
Yeah, I think from Cummins' view is we had 2020 as sort of the bottom of the cycle. Anyway, this is pre-COVID. So, when I get asked around the impact of COVID, I have to remind people that the cycle was already headed kind of and it depends on the segment within construction or ag, but we were already, forecasting a downturn in 2020. What COVID has done for that is it sort of exasperated some of that and added some fuel to the fire. And as we talked earlier, it kind of depends on the region, and it's all had a different impact on the timing by region. Cummins, like a lot of large organizations and corporations, did make the decision earlier in the year to remove our guidance with the street. So we're not, there's just too much uncertainty right now to be very efficient in forecasting, all of the different markets that we serve. So formally, we don't have any guidance. I will tell you that, it's Eric Neal's personal view that, I think that we're probably going to see this down cycle extended now into 2021. I don't have a strong view of whether it's going to be a tail end of 2021 or the middle of 2021, but I personally believe and see some optimism in different parts of the region where things will start to pick up, something probably in the 2021 timeframe. Again, it is very much dependent on the region. We've had really good recovery in China in the last couple of months, and we hope that continues to go. Some areas are kind of at stagnant levels right now and might continue there for months to come. But I personally think that we'll start seeing a road to recovery kind of in the mid to probably late 2020 timeframe. And the sooner would be better, of course. That's my view.
Yeah, thank you. Darren, any thoughts on that?
On the recovery, Ian, is that what the question is?
Yes, so yeah, that the question is, when do you think markets will return to anywhere near to what they were before this pandemic?
It's really difficult to say, and I mean, I think we will see and I've heard this expression, I'm not really sure entirely what it means, but we will see a new normal coming out of this crisis. So it's difficult to say. As Eric said, it did coincide with what would have been an economic downturn. And so the impact of COVID on the economic downturn is we'll see when we come out of the COVID situation, the impact on the economy. But I think, what really as an organization that we've got to do is prepare for the future. And this is going to be a catalyst for organizations to operate in different ways going forward, and maybe managing situations like this. If you go through a crisis like this, it makes you more prepared to manage turbulent situations going forward. So I think with telecommuting and I think we just with these different ways of operating, we're going to be a more robust business community. We can see certain segments that are standing up quite well actually in this situation, even at this critical time. We can see, for example, that the power generation segment is still holding up quite well. The materials handling, with the freight in the ports being reduced, is showing some weaknesses at this point in time. But so I think it will vary depending on the application and the segment, and it also depends on government stimulus as well. If we see some liquidity injected into the construction equipment markets, for example, the construction infrastructure projects, we may see some upside on the construction side. So I think there are various different factors that are going to come into place here. But I think it's true to say that there is going to be a different world coming out of this crisis than the one that went into it.
Great, thanks, Darren. Bill, you have your thoughts on when you think the markets will get back to normal? And interestingly, while Darren was talking there, we had a question from one of the attendees who I think is based in the Netherlands. She was also asking, what will the new normal look like? Any thoughts on that as well?
Yes, I think perhaps my answer will be framed in a smaller market, smaller segment, but it may expand out to global impact as well too. But if you looked at North America and the construction market, that may be a telling sign of what we may expect to see. I think to begin with, the first thing, I think Eric named this as well too, you had to think that market in North America, and in some cases globally, was on an incredible tear since 2009. Up markets for off-highway construction equipment was up for 11 years straight, which is not normal to that business cycle. It's normally a 4 or 5 year up, 4 or 5 year, or a couple years down, then cycle back up. So we did see that, and that was built on many different infrastructure areas like energy, the rise of oil and gas, particularly in North America. I will say that I think, just like Darren and Eric said, there's a lot of uncertainties, elections, funding, those type things out there. So it's very, very difficult to predict what that is. In the same breath, I would also say there are a lot of projects that are unfunded that need to be completed from an infrastructure standpoint. And that's any kind of infrastructure, whether it's highway, bridge, rail, airport, or all the way over into the energy segment. There's a lot of infrastructure in North America that is at the point of failing or will be. And so I think that's important to see how elected officials handle that on the state, local, and federal level in North America. And I guess my last comment in that is that I think our customers are doing fairly well. We look at a lot of our telematics data, and it looks fairly stable in some sectors. For one area, for example, is with less traffic on the highways in North America, is a great opportunity to do a lot more road work and not bottleneck as much. So a lot of those projects are completing faster. It just depends on if the new work gets funded. And again, I think that's a difficult answer, but I do see a little bit of sunshine out there in the future, a little ray of hope.
Darren, just picking up on one of the things you said, one of the attendees has just asked you mentioned power generation was reasonably healthy. Is that generally in the world, or which regions of the world are we thinking about?
Well, from a global perspective, Ian, really, we're seeing, certainly in the North American market, we're seeing a stable power generation segment. In South America, we're seeing a stable power generation segment, but in China, the power generation segment is reasonably strong. And then our other regions in the Middle East, for example, and Turkey, the power generation manufacturing side of the OEM side of producing generators does seem to be fairly robust at this time. And we've seen that before as well in times of economic change. The demand for power still, it fluctuates, but it doesn't fluctuate as much as the economy, shall we say. So the answer to that question actually is globally.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Another of the questions that we had was based on some of the comments that you'd all made about how you'd all adapted and people working from home and using Zoom more. And with more people working from home going forward, there'll be less demand for new build of construction of new build offices, I would imagine. I mean, Bill, is this something you think is likely to happen? Will there be less demand for big office construction projects?
You can look at the airline industry as well too, Ian, and see, the percentages that they're off. Obviously, back to that travel. I think, as Darren, I would kind of say it's a new normal that we don't quite know what that new normal looks like. And again, I would echo in some cases, I think there are well overdue projects. So even if air travel was off, it doesn't mean that certain airports need replaced. I travel a lot myself, so I have a few on my bucket list that I would like to tick off for improvements. But I guess I would answer that question to say potentially in the highway sector. But I also think that as we get to more energy efficiency on highway and off highway vehicles, that's something that we have to look at from an infrastructure standpoint. Renewable energy. I guess if you pick your segment of where you talk about construction, in many cases, it's going to involve off-highway diesel or electrified equipment to put that in place. And it may be stuff, Ian, that are not even on our radar screen right now. It's very easy to look at the highway projects that we know of and say what we need to replace. But as you start expanding into some of the lessons learned from COVID, telecommuting, the need for 5G, renewable energy sources, some of the things that will come up in the future. I think there's a whole growth area that construction and mining groups can pivot to. And I haven't really addressed the mining side, but the mining side from a market standpoint, as well as you could imagine, if you probably follow precious minerals, certain minerals are through the roof in value based on typical pandemic ups and downs, and certain minerals are not. And so that's a little bit of a muted impact. It seems to be fairly stable in a global mining standpoint as well too.
Just over to you, Eric. What's happened with the virus? Will this change anything about the way that you source supplies and components going forward?
Oh, yeah, we, like I had kind of in the introduction, the one beautiful thing or area that we've really put a pretty bright light on is, having a robust supply chain and manufacturing strategy. And that probably of all the different functions that are modifying their work or trying to maybe emphasize the criticality of having good systems and processes in places, that's probably one of the larger ones for Cummins. Thankfully, like others on the call, we do also have a very good global manufacturing footprint that has helped us also mitigate our business. And I think it's also put us into, a few years ago, there were we were all chasing cost, and sometimes, to get those cost reductions, you're going after more single source suppliers. I think that's sort of caused a little bit of pause in those cases where it has been beneficial to have a wider band of supply chain partners that can kind of help fill in those gaps during, whether it's a pandemic or a typhoon or whatever the case may be. You just got to be pretty flexible and speed to react is very. So having good business continuity plans in place, having good supply chain, and then of course all the technologies that my peers have talked about are just really accelerating the need to be, really up on technology. So I think for Cummins, we've been making a pretty strong look at new technologies that we're going to have to invest in the future to not just keep our own operations running, but make sure our customers are, we're very well connected to the customers, our OEM partners, and in our service channel. That I think you're going to see a pretty significant, huge acceleration in things that we're already working on before, but I think the speed to bringing those to light are going to come at a pretty fast pace. Autonomous vehicles and the powertrain play in that, digital electrification, all those sorts of technologies I think are going to be coming at a much quicker pace than we originally thought.
Darren, did you have any thoughts on that as to will it affect the way that your company sources supplies and components going forward?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we had these steering group meetings at a high level in the company. We were looking at our tier one suppliers, but we realized that having multiple tier one suppliers for the same product wasn't really enough. We needed to go down into tier two and tier three suppliers because it depends where our sub suppliers are getting their components from in many cases. So we started to dig into our tier two suppliers and look at, did they have contingency plans if there was, if they had a supply restriction on tier two and tier three suppliers. So we started to dig much deeper into the supply chain than we really have done in the past, which is, I think a learning for the future. And then you've got to be creative. You've got to come up with quick, almost on the day solutions to resolve problems, which is something that, when you're producing hundreds of thousands of engines, it doesn't really fit into those systems very well. So we had to come up with flexible solutions of coming up with contingencies. So, for example, we had a problem with a fan, a simple fan for a radiator. We couldn't get it through our normal supply chains. And we went actually direct to the same manufacturer. The same manufacturer asked them for the part number that we buy, and it's exactly the same product. And we actually bought it for our factories here in North America direct from the manufacturer and not through the Volvo Group supply chain. But it's the same product, so, we have to find, and we weren't compromising the quality of our product in any way. So we had to find flexible solutions to really meet the demands of customers through these, extremely challenging times. And as I said, I think we'll come out of this stronger. I think we'll come out of it with more flexible programs, with more robust programs as far as supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Bill, the sourcing components must be a particularly big issue for a company like Komatsu. Has this whole episode made your company rethink how you source your supplies, do you think?
I would tell you Komatsu is somewhat still vertically integrated on a lot of our off-highway equipment, both mining and construction size. So we make a lot of the components in our own factories for our machines that are made in other factories. So it is a global supply chain, somewhat vertically integrated. As Darren mentioned, there's obviously suppliers and business partners all throughout that supply chain as well too that we count on, whether it's a component factory supplying a component to a main factory or not. I think that vertical integration has been good. And I think being having manufacturing facilities all around the world has also helped buffer and smooth some of that supply chain kind of bullwhip. I would tell you, I think we spent a lot of time on smoothing out and diversifying our supply chain, even though we're vertically integrated. And I think some of this goes back to my first comment about going to the Gemba. Kind of echo what Darren said, you have to go and investigate what our business partners and vendors and suppliers needs are, issues are, constraints are. And so our supply chain group does a heck of a job, and they've had to really jump on it even more quickly here in the last 4 or 5 months. But I think there is some smoothing of the fact that we're kind of building the components for our machines, or the core components for our machines internally in this time frame. And so we see that that's going to continue to be a challenge. I think that the challenge part is the logistics of moving the components around the world. I think Darren mentioned something about ports, and as a former supply chain guy myself, I understand that it's great to have factories all around the world to absorb different market changes, but those parts have to get from point A to point B in a good time frame. And so I think that's one of the things that we'll probably look deeper at, is the logistics of moving those components around.
Just briefly to all of you before we go to the Q&As from the audience. Start with you, Eric. How would you describe the attitude and the flexibility of your workforce in the way they've adapted during all of this? What have you noticed?
With my team around the world, I think there was a shock factor that we were all kind of just trying to adapt to the new way of doing business. But and I don't remember if it was Darren or Bill that mentioned it earlier, but the adoption of the telecommuting work thing, and I was on a teleconference actually earlier this morning with one of my employees from China, and they had said, I actually feel more connected today with you than I did pre-COVID, because we are just doing so many more check-ins, and so I would say the attitude's very strong within the Cummins family. Again, health and safety is bar none our #1 priority, and we're gonna ride this thing out and ensure that we do not impact or sacrifice any of that. But I'd say the overall morale with Cummins is very positive. People are adapting, they're learning new ways of doing business. We're trying different technologies to make ourselves more efficient from wherever we work, and it's sort of put a big light on the need to be more broad than just our little offices that we used to work with now. So I actually think that we're more globally connected today than we were pre-COVID. That's how it feels from my perspective.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric. Darren, did you have any thoughts? Would you agree with Eric on what he said, and how would you describe the attitude of your workforce and their flexibility? And you with Darren?
Yeah, sorry, you broke up there slightly, and I missed what you said. But yeah, no, I think that when it comes to the workforce, or my colleagues and the staff in the company, the communication the communication is important in these times. We've been clear about servicing customers. We've been clear about that we maintained the core strategy that we went into this situation with. We've actually made it clear to the company that we accelerate the new technology platforms. So we are moving quicker into electrification. We're moving quicker into telematics. So we are moving quickly into new technologies. And I think that, we've got to make tweaks here and there and adjustments to the way that we operate. But, we continue with the core strategy that was in place. And I think, communicating with the staff, making sure that we're taking the health and safety measures that we need to take, making sure that the messages are clear to everyone in the Volvo community. I think it's it's helped us get through this situation with a very strong, I would say, a strong kind of desire within the organization to get through this and to serve our customers and to come out the other side stronger.
Do you have any comments on that, Bill, on that subject?
Absolutely. I would echo my fellow two panelists, and the first thing that Komatsu is thinking with our employees and their families is safety. And we can talk about that at a later date, but to describe the mindset of the Komatsu employee, the word that I would use is resilient. Our employees in many cases are considered essential workers in many regions around the world. They support equipment and customers that mine essential minerals. They support customers that build infrastructure that's badly needed in many parts of the world. And one of the things, it's probably not too exciting of an area, but they support landfills and waste services as well. That's something that we've seen particularly grow in this time frame. So our employees have been resilient. They have stepped up, safely stepped up to answer the call of supporting our customers and their customers, and they haven't missed a beat. And then the last thing I would say behind resilient is they've been very innovative. They've learned how to pivot and how to communicate digitally and how to support and provide solutions when they can't be there in person.
Yeah, okay, thanks. We'll just move on to some of the questions from the audience now. One of the questions I've just received, which I thought was quite interesting, is this to all of you, just a brief answer. It's, would you consider 3D printing as a solution to mitigate the global logistics issue? Bill, do you want to start?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have already started some studies and some pilot work in that area globally. Obviously, that would impact the comment that I made about logistics. There are some things that make sense from a 3D printing standpoint, and there are other things that don't, but absolutely.
Yeah. Darren, do you see an increase in 3D
Yeah, I do.
printing?
I do, Ian, and interestingly, we've been employing the 3D printers to make medical equipment, PPE equipment. So, I think that we can use 3D printing in many flexible ways. We delivered some face shields just here in the city of Chesapeake to the local hospital. So I think we can use 3D printers in many ways. And if we need to make parts and it's going to be of the right quality, certainly we can use those resources.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Eric, on 3D printing and how it might make its way in Cummins?
Yeah, like my peers, we've used it for years. It's a very viable solution. A lot of ifs, ands, and buts go into that question around the viability of using it on a higher production scale perspective. And like Darren, we've also been using 3D printing for, some of the medical devices and so forth in our own local region. So I don't think I could really add much more than my two friends have already added, but, same view and opinion.
Yeah, so it seems like for all three of you, your company's been heavily involved in 3D printing already. It's a subject that's been around for quite a number of years now, hasn't it? Bill, is that a fair reflection?
Yes, yeah. Ian, we were talking about ConExpo when I first came on the call, and I remember seeing, I think it was 2 ConExpos ago, maybe an entire mini excavator that was 3D printed, the cab and the arm and the boom. And to Eric's comment, there's some things that are very tangible, and I guess it has to make business sense as well too. The cost, quality, delivery, or the timing of producing something, and the cost have to make sense for it to be a viable option. I do think it helps some of the last mile issue as we talk about a world full of Amazon and FedEx and those type things, that it's very difficult logistically to get that last mile completed. Although those companies have stepped into that area, 3D printing does kind of fill that void in certain instances with certain, what I would call repetitive, repairable parts as well too.
Mhm. Yeah, would you go along with that, Eric?
Yep.
Yeah.
Completely.
And Darren, sorry, carry on, Eric.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, Darren, did you have any thoughts on 3D? It's obviously something that's been around Volvo Penta for quite a time, is it?
Yes, yeah, it is, Ian, and I, echo the comments that have been made. We've used it, today, even today for PPE, and we continue to use it, as I say, to think creatively to provide products. I mean, say if you're producing a large volume of product, it may not be the most economic solution, but it could be a solution, or it has been a solution to find a flexible solution to a problem.
Yeah. Just wanted to touch on another question that we've had. A gentleman was asking regarding your production staff. Do you expect the production employee levels to return to anywhere near what they were before the epidemic? Bill, any thoughts on that? I mean, presumably Komatsu and all companies have had to make some sort of people go for, even if on a temporary basis. Do you think recruitment will ramp up again to normal levels, Bill?
It's a difficult question of the new normal, and I guess I would answer that question as such. We've had to take some very essential steps with our workers to separate them and make them work in smaller groups. Rotational shifts, different times, and again, remote workers can work remotely. But if you're envisioning a production worker, we're enhancing our travel restrictions. We are not allowing as many visitors into our manufacturing facilities. So those groups are going to be working incredibly different shifts, much smaller groups. I envision a assembly line at one of our factories. It's not going to be the sea of humanity that it once was before. And I don't know that that ever changes. I just think the way that we manufacture, the way we assemble, probably becomes a little bit smaller segments and done in a way that prevents the spread of COVID, protects the employee. One of the things that we're very proud of is the workmanship of our employees and the tenure that they have with us at the company. So we want to make sure that they have a job forever, or as long as they can. And I think we're going to take the safety steps to kind of change how we produce materials in our factories.
Well, Volvo Penta, Darren, presumably employment levels have had to go down a little bit, but will they rise back to the figures that they were, do you think?
Yeah, we've made some adjustments particularly when this first happened. We made some adjustments with consultants that were working for the company, for example, and we are actually starting to take some of the critical consultants back into the organization now. For sure, there are going to be some tweaks going forward. We're not going to, we're going to have to adjust to the business, to the economic situation, and to the business realities. Regarding the manufacturing side of things, we have an example of a parts distribution center we have down in Byhalia, Mississippi, which is 1 million square feet parts distribution center. And we have kept that facility running completely through this situation, and we have flexible cleaning and disinfectant programs in place down there, and some of the best practices that we've put in place there. We've actually had meetings with some of our OEM customers and shared the best practices that we put in place in our own production and distribution facilities with our customers. So I think it's a real benefit if we can all learn from each other in this situation. I'm sure that many organizations have got things that they can share with other organizations, and the more we can share, I think the quicker that we're gonna get to where we want to get to.
Yeah, thank you for that, Darren. Eric, I suppose Cummins as well has had to make necessary adjustments during the whole period.
Right. So You know, the way we looked at it is, you know, we kind of did the now. We have a, you know, a plan that is sort of like what we've already done or will be doing between now and the end of the year. We have a plan of like, what will it look like, you know, up to the point of a vaccination, a global vaccination. And then we have kind of this longer term view. I think Darren and Bill have covered kind of the now or kind of up to the vaccination period. Kind of the next thing that we're spending a lot of time now is really trying to understand kind of what the longer term post vaccine way of doing business will. I will say one of the things that we have done at Cummins that is available to anybody, because we have a lot of partners and a lot of customers that may not have the resources that we have, but we've published online we call it a safe work playbook. So any lessons learned that we've done within our manufacturing or even just our facilities and so forth, we've tried to capture those best lessons and best practices so that folks can, you know, benefit from the learnings, good or bad, that we've had, and try to make the world a little bit safer environment for that. So if anybody is interested after the call, you can just go onto the General Cummins website, and there you can search Safe Work Playbook, and you'll be able to kind of look at all the different things that we've done. And if those help you and your business be more efficient, then we certainly want to pass along that learning so that the industry can be a better place. But I think that, back to your original question, I think you know, we will get back to you know, a normal place where we will get back to a pre-COVID, you know, employment. We've made some adjustments, as Darren said, to outsource resources, but some of those, you know, are not long-term or systemic, and you just got to have those extra resources on there. So, you know, it kind of depends on the project, or depends on what you're working on there to when all those resources will come back on play. It also helps a lot when, you know, I think most of us on the call do have a pretty diversified portfolio of products and markets we serve. So, you know, that also helps companies kind of get through the cycle. You know, when one region might be down historically, another region might be coming up online, or in one market's coming down, another one might be offsetting. So I think this idea of innovation and resiliency that Bill talked about is spot on. And I think that companies that can have processes in place to demonstrate that will be the winners in the end of this thing. And we will bring, you know, our employees back. It may be different types of employees, but I think we're going to get back to normal, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Okay, Jen, well, thank you for that. We've pretty much run out of time, so I'd like to thank the three of you very much for your time, your great answers, your insight, and your honesty. I hope the attendees have learned something from it. I would like to thank the attendees for spending the time with us with Diesel Progress on our webinar. I'd like to thank our sponsors again, which is Antares Life Cycle Solutions, Carlisle Brake and Friction, Cummins, JCB Power Systems, and OS Cooling Solutions. Thank you all for attending. The webinar has been recorded and will be available in 2 or 3 days' time. All the attendees will get a notification in an email from Zoom. So thank you again. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everyone learned something. And from our 3 panel members, thank you. And on that note, we'll say goodbye.